And we're back.
Hi, we're back again. Minor technical difficulties, so apologies for that. But we're back and we're talking cars, just like the one I'm sitting in front of, because cars are great. We love cars. It's the whole reason we have this page. It's the whole reason we have this brand. It's the whole reason we started a company. Sorry about that. Yes, so we should be back live now on YouTube and Facebook, with Instagram and TikTok coming shortly in the next few weeks. Chad is working on a little bit of the back end stuff, so I'm here for your viewing and listening pleasure. Mostly, mostly viewing pleasure because I'm extremely handsome and I sound horrible, but that's how it goes. We were wrapping up our conversation on Cummins, and basically, if you missed it in the first part of the stream, this is not for all of you listening, but if you missed it, we were talking about how the EPA slapped Cummins with a $1.67 billion fine, and it's a big fine. But we were just wrapping that part of it up, and we were saying, hey, should they be doing this? No. Is the fine warranted? Yes, if they knew what they were doing. But it's just how it goes. These things are going to happen more and more as electrification becomes more prevalent, and as the EPA continues to crack down on more cheating software and cheating devices and things like that. We'll see how this pans out for the enthusiast community, because the way that the EPA is cracking down on the diesels specifically, I can see that trickling into a lot of the enthusiast community. And Chad was making a reference to government overreach in other areas, specifically ATF, I believe, where we're seeing that sort of trickle into the car community. But yeah, it's sort of the same. It's sort of the same story. We'll see how it pans out, because it's going to be interesting moving forward. Especially, it sucks, but the enthusiast community is such a minority in that sense, because 95 to 98% of all commuters are not enthusiasts. Like, enthusiasm is definitely a smaller percentage, and whether we like to think it's larger than that, like, it's not. Like, if you take all of the cars on the road throughout the entirety of the world, yeah, car enthusiasts make up a very small percentage of that. Maybe 5 or 10%. I'd say 10% maximum. 90 plus percent are commuters only, and they only use cars as a means to get from here to there. And they don't truly love cars. We are now on Instagram, apparently. So, hello, Instagram. Thank you for joining us. And now I'm trying to go on Instagram to see the feed. I don't even know where that is. Quite honestly, I don't know where that is on Instagram. Gonna have to find that. Maybe if I go to my personal profile. Oh, Shifting Lanes is live. Hey, there's me. Hello. Wow. Oh my gosh! Wow, there's lots of people on there. I gotta start keeping up with Instagram. Hi, Instagram. Thank you for joining. This is our first time on there. We're usually on Facebook. We're usually on our second YouTube channel, which is Shifting Lanes Garage. So if you don't follow us there, please go subscribe and follow us there. The car behind me is a 2016 Volvo V60 Polestar, which is a comment from someone that joined earlier. Yeah, we just do this every Wednesday from or at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Chad and I, two of the founding members of Shifting Lanes, Hanson's the third. Chad and I get on here. We talk to you about cars. So thanks for joining, and appreciate you guys. And if you want to watch more, please watch more. But we were just talking about the $1.6 billion EPA fine that Cummins got. That Cummins, the famed diesel engine manufacturer that's in a lot of Dodge / Ram products. And the EPA basically said that they installed cheating software on Rams for 2013 through 2023 models, and they fined them $1.6 billion, which is an absurd amount of money. But it's about a third of their take home profits this year, and it's not going to be a lump sum kind of thing. It's going to be paid out over time for sure, and it's a settlement, and they haven't even paid it out yet. It's a settlement, and it's not something that they're like, oh, like, here you go, EPA, here's $1.6 billion. Like, that's not how this works. Either way, it's going to be interesting to track that and see how that sort of pans out over time. So we had a bit of technical difficulties. Now we're back. We're back on Facebook. We're back on YouTube, and now we're live on Instagram. So welcome and thanks for joining. Chad, are you there? Maybe not. All right. Anyway, Chad's in the background. He's working on the stuff. We're going to be talking about some very interesting racing news very shortly once Chad gets back, because there's some hilarious stuff that we found out in the last week. And again, if you're joining us on Instagram, if you're joining us on any other platform, we're doing a lot of like short form content for you guys, and we've really been pushing that a lot recently. And Chad has been finding some just crazy stories out of the motorsport world that some of the stuff he finds I cannot even begin to fathom where he finds it, for one, and two, how some of these stories even came to fruition, because some wild. So I think that's going to be our next segment is, Chad, what is the story time today? Because I want to hear about it, because every time you come up with a story time, I'm just like this. I'm just like,
all right, so since it's fresh,
please tell me a story.
Since it's fresh on my mind, since I just finished kind of doing a lot of the research on it, and we're going to try to implement these in a lot of our shows where we go more into depth. If you've noticed, a lot of, like Greg mentioned before, the reels and stuff are like just diving into weird motorsports events or historic events. Like last night, we did the one where Dale Earnhardt got mud on his windshield, and his pit crew said, "No, you can't pit." So he leaned out of his car.
Imagine that happening today. No, you can't pit.
Well, they didn't want to lose track position, so he's like, "Okay, I'm not going to be on the radio for a couple minutes." Leans out of his car and proceeds to clean it. Now, not for nothing, if that happened, number one, you couldn't do that in today's NASCARs because the drivers are so cocooned in there. But if you could, you would get black flagged with the quickness. So,
oh yeah,
finding these cool kind of weird stories and stuff, and a lot of them, like the boys are like, it's crazy that you're finding all this stuff. A lot of the stuff, I would say at least half of them, come from my dad mentioning something, or show me something somewhere down the line, and me remembering like, hey, that was a cool story. What are the details behind it? And then that spawns probably like one idea will usually spawn a few reels. So today I kind of wanted to talk about, since we have a decent amount of people, how many people were born in the 80s? I was born in 1983, for example. And it just so happened that in 1983, the Sebring 12 Hours, one of the crown jewel of endurance or sports car racing, is arguably the craziest race I can think of. And I'm not even going to get into the race. It was won by an underdog Porsche team that had no business winning. And that's like the 10th or 12th or 30th story of this event.
Which is wild to think about. So,
I don't even know where to begin. So, a couple things you need to realize about Sebring itself. Number one, it's in Florida. Florida man. Just keep that in the back of your head. Number two, it's usually held right around spring break. So, there's that party atmosphere. So, in 1983, the organizers of the event decided that they were going to crack down on fires, because in previous years, a cloud of smoke, because of so many fires around the track, they said no more fires. It was affecting visibility. It was affecting TV coverage. Not that there was a lot back in the day, but it was just they didn't want the smoke. And I'm not talking about your
They didn't want
your
that smoke.
13-year. Oh, you don't want the smoke? No, I'm talking literal smoke. Like as Jeremy Clarkson once said, it looked like the West Indian dope smoking team had arrived. So they outlaw fire and firewood. So there's some poor bastard at the entrances. It was his job to search and confiscate firewood. So an enterprising individual decided, wait a minute, what are they doing with this firewood? So he walked up, said basically, hey, can I take it? They're like, yeah, sure, we ain't doing anything with it. It's not going in the track, whatever, just go ahead. And I'm paraphrasing here. I don't know the exact story, but effectively, this entrepreneur, we'll call them, scammer is a better word for him, but they get a hold of the firewood that's confiscated. They go a few miles up the road while there's traffic, put up a sign, firewood for sale. They sell these people the firewood, and the people get to the gate. It's confiscated. He goes up, gets the firewood, rinse and repeat until they finally catch on what this guy is doing. So the race itself, I have to check my notes, but I think there was like 83 or 84 cars entered in the race that year, which is a massive amount of cars. But it's awesome because there's so many different classes. It's not like today where there's 3 or 4. There's probably 10 or 15 classes of car. So you could literally show up with the latest and greatest prototype. I think the 935 Porsche or whatever was like it at this point in the game. Or I forget, but there are people showing up with like random minis and stuff. And they're all on the same racetrack at the same time. However, in an oversight, the people in charge of certain important things to hosting a motor race, and I'm not talking about like catering or ticket sales, fuel. There was a very real danger. Actually, I shouldn't say very real danger. They were going to run out of fuel for all of the race cars during the race. They were about to run out. So they red flagged the race so fuel tankers could come in and replenish the high octane race fuel. And then during the night, so during the night portion of the race, that's when stuff got real crazy. So in that time, if a car kind of broke down on the side of the road, it wasn't like today where the driver had to wait and get shuffled off by the safety crews or by track personnel. They literally walked back to the pits. So one of the cars, I think it was a Porsche, ends up breaking down on the side of the road. And and what ends up happening is that the fans swarm the car and start pulling off souvenirs, whatever they could get their hands on, whatever. And this happened at Le Mans, it happened at Sebring, it happened at a lot of these tracks where it's not like a Daytona where it's all enclosed. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It has property boundaries with, farms, ranches, residential areas, like the whole nine. So it's not like it's not like today where there's an official at every 100 yards or what have you. So fans descend, they're ripping off all these souvenirs, and finally a recovery vehicle gets out to the car, chases off, the souvenir hunters, and tows the car back into the pits. Right? Now, if that's not insane enough to like someone who's used to modern racing and how like modern race events are actually conducted, it gets back to the pits. And when they pull it off and the team notices there's something in the driver's seat. Turns out someone don't know why they had it, don't know why they had it on hand, don't know why they brought it out. Again, Sebring is in Florida. It was spring break. People are drunk. But there's a blow-up doll in the driver's seat of this race car that had broken down on the circuit. Also at night, a guy got lost. Legitimately got lost, went off track. Now, they had recently redid the track and shortened it and redid the configuration. But there's a literal term for back in the day called Sebring vertigo, where guys would get lost. And Sebring's flat. It's on an old airfield. It's flat. There's no really defining characteristic that helps you navigate, let alone trying to do so at night. So this guy, he legitimately got lost. So he stops his car, gets out, gets on the roof of his car to try to find his bearings. When he notices that there's some like just because of the way the lights, if anybody who's ever hunted or what have you, you know that at night you shine a flashlight to reflect out off of eyes. So the lights are reflecting, and he notices that there's a bunch of eyes looking at him, which noticeably freaks him out, whether it be people looking to get souvenirs off his car, wild animals, what have you. So, upon further investigation, he realizes that he's so lost. He is now in a neighboring ranch that borders the racetrack, and he is now in a field of cows. Again, imagine that today, right? But, arguably, the best story from this race was, and it goes back to the lack of firewood. And that weekend, that night, was unseasonably, Floridianly cold. So people were cold. They wanted fires to warm up. So there's a lot of these old structures littering. It was an old airfield, remember. A lot of these old structures. So people were just going like, all right, well, nobody's using this hangar anymore. I'm just going to rip some wood off of it and make a fire. So, people, crowds being what they are, it's like, hey, where'd you get that wood? It goes, oh, it's this building over there. You should go. It's right here. It's super easy. So a bunch of people start going, and they're just ripping siding off of this building. Well, it turns out, not only was this building not a part of the racetrack or any of the facilities for the racetrack, not only wasn't it wasn't abandoned. It was somebody's house that people were in, and they're like, what the... They were literally having pieces of their house ripped off by drunk race fans who were cold, who wanted to make a fire. Like, this all happened in one race. You can Google it. There's a great article on this on Sports Car 365. It's I think it's titled Sebring Crazy After All These Years, 1983. And like and then the on-track racing, the favorites broke, and this ragtag team who had an older vehicle, wasn't really of the modern spec, end up winning this race. And again, that's like not even in the top 10 headlines for this event. It's absolutely insane. Like, Sebring.
I feel like a lot of the 1970s and 1980s races have these stories to them, and I'm coming to realize that a lot of humanity in the 70s and 80s just overall was batshit crazy. Like, if you think about it, like, that was the time of insane racing. It was also the time of like random like plane hijackings all over the place. It was the time of musical evolution on a scale of which we'd never seen before. They're probably the two most ridiculous decades of modern times. Maybe 2020. The 2020s might have something to say about that, given what's happened the last couple of years. But looking back on it, there are more of these stories from those two decades than I think that
it was like
in total of like the 90s and the 2000s
I think
combined.
It was in 1986 where a guy, I forget his name. I did a reel on this. But it's Talladega. It's the day of the race, and this guy who doesn't care, doesn't want anything to do with NASCAR, is in town, Lincoln, Alabama, is in town to buy a motorcycle. Last name was Crowder. And he's in traffic. Well, he's starting to we've all been in traffic, and people are starting to get, he's starting to get pissed. He's getting pissed. So finally he just snaps, completely snaps. Decides, okay, somehow jumps a couple fences, ends up on the start-finish line of Talladega as they're getting ready to start the race. And he's like, hey, this Firebird's pretty dang cool. They're fast. They're fun. I'm going to take it for a drive. Does one lap of the circuit. Then it's like, then the local law enforcement on motorcycles and cars is dispatched. And there's video footage of it, which is hysterical. And the cops are just kind of going after him. And while I'm doing the research, while I'm watching this, all I'm thinking is that, like the clown music. Because it's hysterical.
like Benny Hill kind of music playing in the background.
So so eventually they set up this roadblock in turn 4, and the guy's like, oh shit, what am I doing? Realizes what's going on, gets out. And what I didn't include in the reel, because one, there was no time, and two, didn't really need, they were not gentle getting him out of that car. They went in and it was like, get out. They take him to jail, right? Naturally. And keep in mind, when this guy sped off in the Firebird, he almost hit like 5 people, right? So like, he's literally dangerous, and getting him out of that car and ending that situation as quickly as possible is not only good for the race itself, but for public safety. Because if someone's so insane to go and look at and take a pace car for NASCAR, it's not really something that you're going to use delicacy on. It's like, you don't know what this person is going to do next.
Right.
So they take him out, they get him in jail. He's brought up on all these different charges, rightfully so. And if you believe the rumors, he was there after he was booked. He was put in the cell, and minutes afterwards, he gets in a fight with another inmate.
I mean, given that the guy just stole a pace car at a race, not even surprised that that's part of the story.
So, like, he ends up... So, they're like... The local authorities are like, yep, we're no longer going to be messing around with this. And they ship him off to a... They send him to a psychiatric facility. But there's so many, like... And like I said, that story about Dale Earnhardt getting out of his car, that was like 1980... something or other, right? It's basically... I want
to say you said it was 83?
Sebring was 83. This might have been... It was right in that mid-early 80s. And...
Okay.
It was right at the dawn of the... I don't even know how you would describe it, but that age of a lot of things being televised, right? You have... Motorsports are starting to get televised more and more and more. You have cable gaining more and more prevalence, so it's not just 4 channels and PBS. You have access to 50, 60, 70 different channels, so there's a lot more specialization and everything. So like, a lot of these stuffs are a lot more documented, but it was still in sort of that before the technological age of, cell phones or any of that sort of stuff. It's just insane. But like, not for nothing, a lot of the post-war NASCAR stuff is just as crazy. Like, the first ever Cup race ended up going to court to decide the winner. Like,
that's crazy.
First ever. Basically, Moonshiner loans his car out to the guy, this driver. It's Charlotte, and you have to remember the dirt tracks in general of the day, but the Charlotte dirt track specifically was very rough. So if you had any sort of like suspension modifications, you were going to do better. And shockingly, this guy lapped the field. He was in the lead by 3 laps. But it turns out his car was a moonshine runner, and it had really beefed up rear suspension, so it could hold, I forget what it was, like 20 or 30 gallons of moonshine. And the car would look like any other car driving down the street to law enforcement. And the owner, Herbert Westmoreland, was the owner of the car. And he's maintained that Bill France and NASCAR told him it was totally fine before the race. Ends up going to court. Now, first place for this race was $2,000. Westmoreland sues NASCAR for $10,000 in 1949, I want to say 48 or 49, and The judge is like, dude, this is a private entity. They can make the rules and enforce them how they see fit. Case closed. So
This is
I forget the
amazing.
guy who won. His name. All I do remember is he won in a Lincoln. Like, a Lincoln. Just let that sort of sink in.
That's fantastic.
So he ends up winning this race, but like I forget. One of the research I'm doing on another reel that's coming out soon is, and again, I don't know the specifics because I haven't really written it out, but effectively what it is guy shows up to a race, doesn't have a roll cage in his car, which is mandatory, and it has to be a metal roll cage. You know, they had figured out that guys were making like flimsy little cardboard or whatever the card or roll cages, whatever. It had to be steel. So this guy goes up, and is like, "What are we gonna do?" And so he rudimentally makes a roll cage out of 2x4s. Goes up to NASCAR officials, and he's like, "Here's my roll cage," and they're like, "Oh, fine, go race." Like again, back in the day, like safety 12th.
Pretty
But
much.
they tell him, they go, "We're not going to make a stink about this. But if you win or finish in, I think at the time, if you finished in the top 5, which was or if you finished in the money, you opened yourself to protest. So someone could sit here and say, I don't think that car is legal. So I'm going to protest the car." So he wins the race, and someone protests, and he gets eliminated. But NASCAR wasn't going to do diddly squat unless someone else called him out on it. It's just, I love that early days in motorsports, and especially in NASCAR, because it came from guys who were literally skirting the law, right? Famously from moonshiners and everything. So the cheating, like guys like Smokey Unick, who's got 3 books, and the guy was a brilliant, an amazing mechanic, arguably one of the best mechanics to ever exist in NASCAR history, right? Like guys like him, Cale Yarborough famously said, "If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying." Like Richard Petty famously won a race. His 198th race win was with an engine that was like 20 cubic inches bigger than the rules allowed. Like, yeah, I'm fine. It's totally fine. And he got stripped the points for the race, got fined, but kept the race win because second place was Cale Yarborough's team, and they sort of buggered off before anyone could expect their car. So it's like, but like there was these old cheats
Of
where,
course.
you know, they'd take the spark plugs out to test the volume and the displacement of the engine. And, you know, in Formula One, they do things like engineer an entire system that meant to drain water onto the track. Like if you ever heard of water cooled brakes, total farce. But Williams and Brabham did this as a way of dropping ballast so they could run 20, 30 kilos lighter during the race, and the rules allowed them to refill any fluids they lost during the race so they'd make weight. Like they designed an entire system for that. In NASCAR, get around displacement, they would go up and be like, Mr. Check out that blonde in the stand. And while they're doing that, they're dropping cigarette butts into the combustion chamber so it displaces less air. Just
It's ridiculous. By the way, everyone's saying that my audio is very loud, apparently.
odd. Speak.
I'm not sure why. Hello? Hello? Speaking. Loud noises. Loud noises. I don't want to be too loud because I don't want to blow anyone's speakers out. I blame the listeners.
The
Also,
only thing I can think
don't
of
blame
is
the
just
listeners.
check the gain on the bottom of your mic.
Yeah, I adjusted it a little bit, and Andrew says it's much better, so that's good.
Yeah,
Um,
but a lot of this
cool.
stuff.
And thank you for all for confirming.
Speaking of thank yous, Doug, thank you for the 100 stars for quote unquote a better producer.
Yes. Yeah, I blame Chad
Yes,
for almost everything.
software crashing. I am Le Devil.
Ha! See? It's not just me.
Yeah, but I did
It's not a me thing.
It is you.
It's me just being on stream. The software was like, "Goo, that guy's ugly." Crash, crash, crash.
um, Anthony, welcome to the stream. Sean, welcome. Sean goes. It's just Greg's audio is loud. Sean goes, do we all agree that Group B was probably the most dangerous racing related shenanigans for both drivers and fans? I will say this. In the early days of Formula One, no barricades, no real rescue anything, no paramedics, no health crew, no nothing. Now, Group B was insane because they basically gave manufacturers an open rule book, told them to go nuts. And then there was no regulation on spectators. So, but Group B, I mean, that same era, look up the Dakar rally and how it was commonplace early in that rally's history for drivers to be taken hostage.
Yep.
You know, basically, if you go back in time, motorsports, if you looked at motorsports today, or if you looked at motorsports and back in the day through the eyes of today's safety regulations, people would be appalled. You know, Jackie Stewart famously got in a crash. I think it was at Spa. And he could not get out of his car. And back in the day, fire was the number one risk. I mean, granted, being yeeted into a tree at 150 miles an hour. Also, not really great for the human body, especially since seatbelts were a suggestion, really, and helmets were leather.
Basically. Yeah.
But Jackie Stewart famously...
Could you imagine leather helmets today?
Could you imagine a one-point racing harness?
No, neither of those things.
But he gets into an accident. And again, fire was the thing. Because most of the time, if a car got into an accident, it wasn't if, it was when the fire arrived. You know, you had drivers... A driver was famously killed at Monaco. Well, I forget the car. And I forget the guy's name, unfortunately. But the car, they were testing out this new metal, magnesium. Now, anyone who knows much about magnesium and stuff is once that shit ignites, it's almost impossible to put out. And to make matters more fun, hay bales were lining hay bales were the safer barrier of the day. So, but Jackie Stewart's driving. He gets into an accident. Fortunately, it's not too bad, but the steering column is sort of wedged, and he can't get out of his car. Thankfully, I think it was like a nun or a priest driving home from service or what have you, happened to be driving by where he went off, got him out of the car, unbolted the steering wheel. So famously, after that incident, if you look at Jackie Stewart's steering wheel, and remember, these steering wheels weren't basically the tablets that they are today. If you look at his steering wheel for the rest of his career, he famously had a wrench in the exact size of the bolts holding on his steering wheel. So if that ever happened again, he could unbolt the steering wheel from the car.
That's very cool.
You know, it was pretty recently. It was right around when they started taking safety, so Jackie Stewart famously started the Formula One Drivers Association, which was solely based on safety and everything. And he was very instrumental in improving barriers, improving runoff areas, and basically, him and his other drivers, we ain't going to drive unless you do these things. But it took it till a lot of it really wasn't next level, or safety wasn't really, because it was a flip. It was performance with as much safety as you could do within the design, but performance was the number one. Today it's flipped. Now it's the safety cell is number one, and then we bolt performance to it. But it wasn't until Senna's death, that era, the early to mid 90s, that safety really in motorsports started being taken seriously. And
yeah,
and it's crazy.
That's a good point.
Look at every.
Yeah, and Senna was a big proponent of all of those safety regulations in F1 for as much of the dickhead he was on track. You know, crashing out Frost on purpose, like no matter how you slice that. Senna's my favorite driver of all time, but like, yeah, he definitely did that. That's a real thing he did. But he was also it was highlighted in a lot of different Senna documentaries, from Top Gear to Senna. Um, but he was a very big proponent to make sure that safety was sort of at the forefront in a lot of ways. And it's unfortunate that safety was the reason why he met his untimely demise. But that era of like the early '90s really is the one that started to change everything.
Yeah, because it was. I mean, it's pretty nuts because it took a lot of this stuff for people to look at it in a different sort of fashion. It was one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you remember, like the early days of like the X Games and like got like Big Air and all this other sort of stuff, and the viewpoint of that is like, well, if you're crazy enough to take a dirt bike, jump 50 feet in the air, and try to do backflips, well, you're gonna get hurt. And I'm not really gonna be sympathetic. I'm not saying me personally. I'm just saying the general consensus of that was you're doing something highly dangerous. You're gonna get hurt. It's part of the gig, and that's how
Right.
motorsports were looked
Right.
at. It's why Colin Chapman, for all his success, all of his brilliant cars, all of his great road cars, there was a black cloud around him that followed him pretty much everywhere. In that you go drive for Lotus, you're gonna be fast, but that car has nothing in the way of safety.
No.
And like to Andrew's point, then you have Grosjean living through his crash because safety is the priority. You look at.
I was gonna say Grosjean lived because Senna died. I would say that's a line you can draw from one to the other, quite
Oh,
honestly.
100%. These drivers, again, it's nuts to me when you look at what passed as safety back in the day, and NASCAR, believe it or not, even though we have had some untimely deaths, Dale Earnhardt being the most famous, the NASCAR has actually, for a lot of its history, been at the fore. It's been among motorsports was never safe, but among the safest given the time frame. They were mandating roll cages long before Formula One was mandating roll hoops.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that. So,
Yeah.
like the halo, that was from a near miss. That wasn't because someone died. Like Andrew mentioned that the halo was from a near miss. Thankfully, I mean, it was a very bad injury for what was it, Massa? He took the spring to the helmet.
Oh, Felipe Massa. Yeah, yeah.
It was from that, and then it was from unfortunately. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna blank on the name, but he was
It's Jules Bianchi.
at Japan.
Yep.
Now, I
Yep.
don't know if the Halos of today are strong enough to stop a bucket loader and its tonnage of momentum, but safety was always reactive. Look at you know, in the new Ferrari movie, they highlight how Ferraris, and spoiler alerts, but I will sit here and tell you this: if you want to be depressed for like 2.5 hours, go watch the new Ferrari movie. It's actually significantly truer to history than I was expecting, but then you realize Ferrari was a piece of shit, and his story isn't exactly an uplifting one. But the whole thing was about winning the Mille Miglia, and they did. He finished first, second, third. He had
Yeah.
5 cars. One car broke, and one car crashed, taking out like 11 or 12 people. But back in the day, it was Ferrari triumphs, and then the back page had 12 dead in fatal accident, right? But at the time, and I forget the result, but at the time, if there was a motorsport accident where there was fatalities or gross injury involved in Italy, of all places,
Yeah.
the manufacturer of the car or the car owner could be seen to be could be held liable as if they had pulled a trigger on a gun.
Right.
And again, I
Because
forget
they're the
how.
ones that made it.
You know,
Well, that was
I forget.
what was the where's the same arenas in Italy, right? It was is the Italian.
Yeah,
That was part of the whole Senate investigation was Williams at fault for literally murdering or killing Ayrton Senna. Like
manslaughter.
they correct. It was a huge thing, and by the end of everything, it was the statute of limitations had run out. But Williams was in court for many years because of that, because of was the steering column modified in such a way where it was unsafe to drive, and did they know that? And it was the aftermath of that for Williams specifically was pretty insane in the Italian courts, and it's highlighted very minimally in a lot of the documentaries. But if you read into the sort of lore of the aftermath of that weekend, um, it was a major thing for many years afterwards.
Yeah, was it like, and then you look at like catch fencing, and then you look at just catch fencing, like wheel tethers, like the whole nine, like the amount of stuff that if you took an engineer from back in the day and said, "Hey, you got to tether that wheel or have a way of wheels bouncing and preventing a wheel from bouncing um, into the crowd," they would have looked at you like you were high. And
Right.
it's great. Like, what was it? And again, it goes back to Ferrari. Ferrari would sit here and say, "It is not my job to keep you safe, but it is my job to give you a winning race car. And it is your job to see that it wins." And it was almost like that Ivan Drago moment in Rocky, where it's if he dies, he dies.
I must break you.
And I mean, I remember it was actually this is interesting because it was actually a big talking point at Flemington Raceway, which was a former circle track by me, by where Greg and I grew up. I guess it's still technically near both of us, as Greg only moved 30 minutes
Yeah.
away. But
Yeah, I was gonna say
um,
I'm not that far.
it was one of the fastest. I forget, it was a short track, but it was one of the fastest short tracks because of the design. And it was one of the first tracks to implement. Remember before safer barriers, they had those giant foam blocks?
Mm-hmm.
Flemington was one of the first places to experiment with that because of the speeds and everything. Uh, just look at the advancements in at like Le Mans, or I'll use a better one. Most of us have seen Gran Turismo, where Jan Mittelbro's car at the Nürburgring. Similar thing to what happened to Mercedes in '98, but he comes up over a crest, loses arrow over the splitter, car goes up and almost flips and everything.
Yeah.
Within a year, they had removed that hill or made it less severe on a track that's been around since World War II.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I mean, Germany's very much about that.
I mean, they are and they aren't.
Right after the World Wars, they're like, we need to change all of the lyrics of our national anthem, and they were just like, "Yep, we're doing that." They did that.
I mean, there's something to be said for German efficiency, but
Right, exactly. Like, if anyone's gonna do that, it's the Germans. Like, they're like, there is a problem here. We are going to fix it, and we're going to fix it now. The end.
what's going on, Nicholas? But on the flip side, how many years did they race at the Nürburgring before they're like, all right, maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the other side of it. It's like, oh, this is a great track, but yeah, it's like 20 miles of nothingness. And to get safety crews there, it's going to take like 35 minutes. Like it's not a track for Formula One, and it shouldn't have been far beyond or far in the past. But yeah, it's not great.
I mean, Sean goes, I'm surprised we haven't had more crashes at Laguna Seca with the carousel. And I will. So there's a couple things going on with the carousel. Number one, braking zone. And it's pretty. Two, there have been accidents. There have been pretty gnarly accidents there. But it's not a. What's the word? It's a pretty, like I said, it's a pretty heavy braking zone. So there have been instances where guys have gone into it and the brakes have failed, and it's been pretty dang spectacular. But it's not like some of these tracks where you have something break in a corner where you're pulling ridiculous G's. That actually, that reminds me. And we're talking about safety and giving a shit about your drivers and all this other stuff. I think it was in 2001. It was right in the midst of the kart IRL wars. And Texas Motor Speedway had just become a thing. IRL shows up, has a phenomenal race weekend. Just absolutely great. The racing's epic. And now they're waiting for the kart cars, which at that time were ballistically, foolishly, insanely fast. Earlier that year, I forget who it was. Oh, it was Jill DeFerrin. Had set a qualifying lap around California Motor Speedway that averaged 241 miles an hour.
Which is insane.
We're talking turbocharged V8s making over 1,000 horsepower, pretty much unrestricted. Just go have at it, boys. So they get to Texas. Texas has 31 degrees of banking. So, and the way it's designed is you're in a corner for most of the lap. It's not like, picture like a Darlington where it's two straightaways and you have the corners, but there's these straightaways that you can kind of rest at. It's mostly corners, so you're mostly in the banking. So the Kart World Series shows up. And right away on Friday, they're like, something's up. Because drivers are getting out of their cars, they're dizzy, they're experiencing like vertigo-like symptoms. Patrick Carpentier famously said, I was still having trouble walking in a straight line after 5 minutes after getting out of the car. It turns out these guys were being subjected to 5 Gs for over 70% of the time. So they were literally getting G-lock, like close to getting G.
Which is literally a lot.
For point of reference, they invented the G suit at about 4 Gs. There's a famous World War II / World War I British pilot that in World War I gets shot, loses both his legs, fights, ends up flying a Spitfire during the Blitz with prosthetics. And he's being able to pull in, he's pulling these tighter maneuvers, pulling higher G maneuvers than every other pilot. And they're like, what the hell's going on? And it turns out, because he doesn't have his legs from the knees down, or from just above the knee down, there's less place for the blood to go. So it wasn't pulling in his feet. So he wasn't risking that G-lock. Fast forward to 2001, and that's actually the inspiration. But if you ever seen Star Fox, where they all get surgically, like, robotic legs, that piece of history is what many believe to be the inspiration behind that. So, at any rate, they hold a driver's meeting, and they're like 20 of the 25 drivers are like, yo, I feel like ass out there. I'm getting crazy tunnel vision. I'm not feeling right. I'm getting out of the car and it feels like I was just in a cyclotron for 9 hours straight. Like, this is not good. And they found out that everyone who had run, I think it was like 7 or 8 minutes consecutively, were feeling these symptoms. Like, anyone who ran less than that wasn't feeling them. So the doctors got involved and they realized, all right, if we let these guys go for like 10 plus minutes, we're going to start having guys passing out at 230 miles an hour, mind you. So at the last minute, like literally as they're coming on to air for the broadcast of the race, they cancel it. I don't know if they do that 20 years prior. I mean, don't get me wrong. The cars aren't probably going that fast just based on the rule set of the time. But like,
Right.
they were like, yo, we're going to kill people. We probably shouldn't do that. You know, the doctors said, quote, yeah, if you guys want to go around at like 220 miles an hour, you should be fine. But show me a racer who's going to be like, I'm going to self-govern when I have an extra 10 miles an hour in the hopper. They're just not going to do it.
Yeah. That's the first and only time kart maybe possibly considered restrictor plates. Which probably wasn't even a thing.
Yeah, like Andrew goes, that's a pretty interesting rabbit hole, canceled races and stuff. I mean, just think about the difference in mentality between that, where the drivers are like, yeah, we kind of feel like ass, to where Niki Lauda famously sat up in 1976 before the race that his big accident. Set up, hey guys, this ain't safe, and a lot of the drivers are like, you're not wrong, and the governing body's like, well, what do you guys want to do? We're gonna host it, so whoever wants to race, go ahead. I mean, don't get me wrong, Jean-Marie Balest is another piece of human garbage, but he was the whole one that when they started having safety concerns of Group B, who was like, yeah, well, it's up to the spectator. These cars are fast, the fastest they've ever been. You're taking your life into your own hands getting close. So what are idiots going to do? They're going to get close. Because in certain countries, Spain, Italy, the list goes on. It was a test of manhood, like legitimately a test of manhood to see how close you could get to the cars. So you could sit here and say, it's dangerous, you probably shouldn't do that. And these guys are like, haha, that just makes the cock extension even bigger.
Right. Exactly.
Panulo, I apologize if I butchered your name, over on Instagram, asks, what car is behind Greg? It's a V60 Polestar.
V60 Polestar. Oh, yes. And I saw someone else on Instagram saying, is that a Trackhawk behind you? And I'm like, very cool if it was. It is not.
I mean, it's got the Swedish...
Still a cool car. Not a Trackhawk.
I mean, it's got the Swedish Hellcat. Something I literally just made up.
It sure does. It's got the Moose Cat.
Yeah. That reminds me, to anyone watching and anyone specifically in our supporters group or who just wants it, I am finally, with Christmas, I finally acquired enough material. A lot of you have it, or just you can ping me in the supporter group if you don't. Start DMing me your addresses. I'm going to start sending you guys, for being supporters, I'm going to start sending you guys out some stuff. So, Doug, if you're still here as the 4-star general of chat, I'm sure I'll get your address first. But no, I'll make a post in the group. But anyone, Andrew, if you're watching, guys, even if you aren't supporters, but guys who are here a ton, Sean, I know you watch a ton. Anyone over on Nate over on YouTube and stuff like that. You guys shoot me a DM and we'll get you some of that stuff, because I finally found a lot of the stuff and I've been waiting until after the holiday season. I wanted to try to send it out as part of the holiday season. It's like almost like a Shifting Lanes like monthly box subscription, but only once. We'll consider subscription a you get a box every third year.
Yeah, say shifting lanes bespoke post, and by bespoke we mean
Really
you get
bespoke.
one, and then that's it. It's really bespoke. You only get it once ever.
Nicholas goes, yeah, give Doug a big brain. I mean, the man is one of the most organized and well put together human beings I have come across. So we naturally, his rank keeps increasing. I guess we're gonna have to go with like Galactic Chancellor or something for the next one. But yeah, so
Or you can go. You can go very Marvel and go the Living Tribunal.
true. But
Oh, and really quick over on YouTube, Andrew Pastorelli. So this actually, fun fact, this is not a four-cylinder Polestar. They actually had 2 years where they made inline six cylinders, and this is one of them. 2015 and 2016, you get an inline six-cylinder with a nice turbo, putting out 345 at the crank. This one has a tune and a downpipe, putting out about. Ooh, I don't even remember the dyno numbers. 406 at the crank.
half
So
of what the Mustang makes.
yeah, not as much, not nearly as much as what Chad's Mustang GT has, but more than stock. And it sounds glorious doing it. So that's the best part. So it's cool. It's very rare. A lot of people don't know that they even made six cylinders, which is kind of cool. It's it's a cool car. I get comments on it all the time. Not and again, not a humble brag, but people will come up and say, "Hey, that's a cool car. Is that a Polestar?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And we chat about it, whatever. I was actually at a local coffee shop the other day, and a guy came up to me and is like, "Is that a real Polestar?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is." And he's like, "Is it the six or the four?" And I go, "It's the six." And he's like, "Nice. I'm local. We need to take a drive." And I'm like, "Good. Follow me on Instagram. Let's go." So it was pretty cool. So it's a cool car, honestly. It's very it's very fun, and it's my daily. So the kids like it. Actually, Chad, I forgot to tell you this. The other day it was last week before the holiday break, and we get in the car, and my oldest Everett, he goes, "Dad, I really like that you have a fast car." And I go, "Oh yeah, buddy. What do you like about it being fast?" He goes, I just like that it's fast, but when you start it up, it's too loud." It's too loud. I don't like when you start it up. It's way too loud. And I'll go, "Okay, I'll try to make it a little quieter for you when it's loud. But you like that it's fast." Like he goes, "Yeah." I go, "So do you like the noise? And would you like it if Dad's car was quieter?" He goes, "No, I like the noise. I like it loud, but not on start. I don't like it when it's loud on start." I'm like, "Okay, I'll make it quieter on start, but when we're going, I'll make sure it goes loud." So I thought that was kind of funny.
Huh. Well, we should introduce him to the Mustang on Cold Start.
Yes, we should. Then he'll be like, "Oh, Dad, your car's way quieter."
Oh, your dad's practically or your car is practically electric, Dad.
Yeah, like, "Dad, why isn't your car as loud as Mr. Chad's?"
Sean goes, I'll attempt to drag race the Stang in the long shard if Chad is down when the monstrosity is done. I'm 100%. I'll put it to you this way. Getting to the track a lot more next summer or spring and summer is something I 100% want to try to do. My fall plans for getting to the track were life got in the way. If you know, you know. But getting to the track next spring, summer is definitely something I want to do. We got to start data logging to make sure we're good in some areas, but I also want to race. I didn't give this car all this power just so I could scare the living crap out of Greg. Which is this week's video, by the way. Tune in tomorrow.
That's right.
Islander bust, 100%, Andrew. So, and
Right.
trying to get into like an organized fashion of going and like having it as a place for the guys who are local to us, a chance to kind of have like a meet and greet and bring your cars out. Like I said, if you want to run, We can run. I make no pretense about being a seasoned drag racer that I will smoke every single one of you, because it probably won't. The one and only time I tried to, or the two times I tried to race her, I blew the exhaust off, and we had the ECU pulling power for reasons known only to Jesus. So, so let's see here.
Yeah.
Anthony goes, I can hear the Mustang cold start from here. I'm doing something right then.
That's right.
Let's see here.
I gotta, sorry, like the 93rd time I've already left tonight. I'll be right back. I gotta check one of my kids. I'll be right back.
Andrew goes, the GTI is not running. I have to keep my pride. It's the joys of car ownership. I mean, from what I understand when we talked about it, it was something relatively simple. But you're entrusting the dealership, I think, or the mechanic to take care of, because it's one of those things where you don't really want to mess with it, and because it's one of those things, if you get wrong, it goes really wrong. Sean goes, I'll have to learn how to drive a lawnmower with a power to weight ratio greater than a Koenigsegg. It runs no drags, 285 on a good day. I mean, the Volkswagen wasn't exactly thinking of the quarter mile when they built that car. That's awesome that it's fixed. Great to see another viewer's vehicle back on the road. That is what we're here about. Although I will say this, Sean, it does bring up how the hell are we going to race? Just throwing it out there. But yeah, so those of you, if you've watched the video where Greg finally drove the Mustang, he gave it like maybe 9/10. Or no, I'm sorry, like 4/10. It was being nice. Not his car. I mean, I'd have been totally fine if he decided to stand on it a little bit, but he was respectful. But this week's video is, yeah, I get on her, and it was fun. I mean, that car is such a mindfuck because it revs higher than most V8s, and now with the tires she has on her, when they are up at temp, the grip is insane. I mean, it is truly insane, the levels of grip that car is capable of. I mean, it should grip. I have steamrollers for tires. As a point of reference, I have 650 millimeters worth of traction, just the rear tires, which is about 2/3 of Greg's four-wheel drive. So it's 285. I just realized this, Andrew. Your car makes 230 or 285 on a good day. The mods I added to the Mustang make almost that. Let's see here, 765. Yeah, 365 in mods, roughly, at the crank. 307 at the wheel. What was I doing? Right. So, let's see. Sean goes, as per West Virginia law, why am I not surprised that this lawnmower with the greater power to weight ratio than a Koenigsegg was conceived in West Virginia? As per West Virginia law, I can and will have the launch art registered on the and road legal, so I could drive it to you. But trailer it, or if I have a station wagon, throw it in the back and do it that way. I was thinking more along the lines of how the hell does one of those things get legal on the track? But either way, this sounds like a pretty insane creation that we kind of need to see. Andrew goes still. Andrew goes still love the GTI for some autocross. Oh, 100%. They're great for that. This small little front wheel drive cars do really really well in autocross. I mean, rear wheel drive still does, rear wheel drive things. But that's another thing I want to try to get to as much track or performance driving things as I can next summer. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do it every weekend, but it's something I want to do more of. I eventually want to get to a race school and learn more car control. I do have a pretty decent amount of official instruction from a professional racer or a professional race instructor or a stunt driver. You'd be surprised how much correlates from race car driver to stunt driver. But at any rate, I want to get more of that stuff. Like down the road, I would love to be able to do those videos. Say we got a track rental and be able to, do a controlled drift or drive the car or be able to get into a car, learn it, and be able to go 9/10 pretty quickly. Like that's, budget's being, but that would be once the Mustang is done. It's still a long way from being done, but that would be before the next. If I have a budget, I'm going to race school because I want to learn how to be faster, and I want to learn how to, do fun stuff in closed circuit situations. And Greg. Sean,
My budget's going towards an F-Type. The end.
Sean goes, I just need lights and a reasonable braking system. They don't really specify that last part. LOL. That's been a project on the books for a while. Conceived it while I was still in Virginia. So you needed to add the West in your life to get it. Let me put it to you this way, man. The thing sounds absolutely batshit, and it's something I definitely want to see and learn more of. Greg budget for a big turbo. I love you, Anthony.
No big turbo, big V8 engine. The end.
With a screwy boy.
Yes.
Andrew goes, the
big screwy boy. That's what I need.
The skid pad at Thompson is awesome. I actually been to Thompson. It's a great little track. I drove a Lamborghini on their autocross track there. It was pretty awesome, even though that Lambo, I think, was down 2 cylinders. Greg, you and I, we went there.
We sure did.
It's essentially...
And definitely was not a properly running Lambo, that's for sure.
But I remember that track layout was always pretty... That track was cool because the elevation and where you could view and things like that. I mean, you pick it. Like, Dirtfish, O'Neill, Bondurant. Like, I don't even... Bondurant might not be in business anymore. I can't remember. But, like, that sort of stuff. I would love to go to rally school and then go to, like, more of a track, like, pavement school, if you were.
As someone who's done O'Neill, just for a press thing, it was awesome. I would recommend that almost over any track day ever. It taught me literally in 24 hours more about car control than I've ever known in my entire life. It was an unbelievably good experience.
Right, because
I would recommend that over almost everything.
Oh, well, that's why rally school would be first, because it is car control.
Yeah.
And you can do it at speeds significantly slower than you can on pavement. So,
right. Right.
Andrew goes, Lime Rock is still my favorite for a track day. I need to get up there for a track day because Lime Rock's one of those local tracks that are close to me, in a sense. Because I remember as a kid, my dad would take me up to Lime Rock. He used to take me up to Old Bridgeport, which I think is a golf course now. All those things. But, like, Lime Rock is such a cool little track because it's, for what it is versus the history around Lime Rock, like Paul Newman's history at Lime Rock and that sort of stuff is all so, it's just so cool. And, like, I remember going up there and seeing the IMSA GT cars, like GTP racing there. and seeing like the Bud Light Jaguars and all this other stuff. Like, just super cool stuff. Always on like Memorial Day, like so we'd either listen to or we'd go to like the visitor center and watch like the Indy 500 while watching the race, or we'd have it on the radio as we walked around. Like, I want to be able to go and do a lot more of this track stuff and have the confidence to, I want to say, push myself from a skill perspective, but like get more out of the Mustang than I can now. I'm not going to sit here and tell you like I putter around with that thing. Again, Greg can attest that I certainly do not.
Yeah,
But
definitely not.
but I just love the idea, and in my head I go like, man, if we ever got huge, like I'd love to have this show, and I'd love to be able to drive. Because let's face it, when you watch a Top Gear review or you watch a Motor Week review, you watch the Top Gear review, even though it probably has less information in it, because they're driving a car like it was designed to be driven. You know, they're taking a sports car and driving it like a sports car.
Right.
You know, Justin, welcome, and thank you for the 200 stars. Appreciate you, brother.
You're never late if you're here, man. You're always good.
Andrew goes, I mean, if you want car control, Squeeze Mountain Road during a snowstorm. Well, it's funny you should mention that, because that's exactly how my dad taught me
Accurate.
car control. Was go up and down and then go to our church and then do impromptu drifting, unintended, as Dad pulled the e-brake whenever he felt like it.
That's right.
It's just, and another fun thing about Lime Rock, I went there with a Chevy Traverse and did their autocross track in the snow. And their only thing is we don't care if you break it, you just got to it's on you to get home then. 'Cause we all drove our cars there. Stayed in arguably the nicest, most, like the best hotel I think I've ever stayed in for any sort of car-related press event. I mean, I've stayed in some cool places, like when we were down in Florida. I stayed in some cool places overlooking the beach, but this was like almost a small little cottage type thing that had like a really small town vibe, but it was private enough. You know, it was almost like a duplex in a way, but it was private enough, but it was very well done. It had that very old style architecture, but it was very nice. It wasn't like it was falling apart or anything. That was such a fun trip. I enjoyed the hell out of it. And I never thought one of the most fun things I'd ever do in a car involved a Chevy Traverse, but that motherfucker got air.
I mean, any car in the snow can be fun as long as you know how to handle it.
Andrew goes, we should host, in quotes, an unofficial Schools. You say that, man. Every time I'm driving on Schools Mountain, I go, how cool would it be to have this be a hill climb event? Like starting I don't really want to get, starting all the way at this street that 90% of the chat has any clue where it is.
Right.
Basically, starting at the street I grew up on, going all the way up the hill, past the Muni building. I mean, that's such a fun drive. That and doing this is specifically for Andrew and Greg's benefit, a Kings Highway hill climb, like short course hill climb.
Yes. Yes.
And they go, speaking of tracks, I hear my local track, Southside Speedway, is set to possibly make a return. That would be awesome. I'm all for tracks making a comeback, especially in this day and age, as the car and performance driving and small town tracks are being vilified more and more and more. Sean, my mom taught me snow driving in a Ford E350 extended length van, basically drifting a bus in the snow.
I mean, you're not wrong.
No, man. I mean,
that is a hefty vehicle.
My GMFODs were really good in the snow. My Fiero, not so much. Why? It had that built-in snow melting feature. Thick but catch fire. Yeah, Andrew Pastorelli in I think that's YouTube goes, a car in the snow becomes significantly more fun when you don't care about totaling it. Agreed.
Super accurate.
But I guess on that note, guys, we're gonna call it for the night. It's already 11:15. Appreciate to everyone
Yep.
who appreciate to everyone for tuning in, for commenting, for liking. Those of you who supported, became a supporter. Nicholas, thank you. Justin, Steve, Doug, everyone else I forget. I always forget at the end of the
Justin.
night. I forget at the end of the night to filter my alerts to just show certain things, and I always forget about it. So I just want to appreciate everyone to watching. If you're over on Instagram, thank you so much for tuning in to our first stream. It was a bit of a weird one, but I appreciate everyone.
Yes.
And we will catch you next week. We might have a special guest. I'm still working on finalizing that. So stay tuned to the socials for that. But